Well, what do you reckon, John? Shall we make a start?
I reckon, yes. Okay, Faye. Happy for you to
Wonderful.
kick off. Yep.
Great. Kia ora, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're absolutely delighted to be bringing you this webinar as part of the Mental Health Awareness Week. We here at GROW, the team here at GROW, do a lot of work in professional development on mental health issues and are 100% behind this Mental Health Awareness Week. We're absolutely delighted, as I say, to be working with John Henden. We've done a lot of work with John since 2018 when he came over to New Zealand and did his solution-focused approach to suicide prevention, and also his workshops, face-to-face workshops on severe trauma and stress recovery. In just a moment, I'll hand over to John so we can make a start, but I would like to do a karakia to welcome everyone. Kia hangi, te akau. Kia tika, kia piono. Kia whae, kia toki. Kia eke, panu, panuku. Huia ea, taiki ea. This is asking us and saying, for learning to work, for truth, for honesty to prevail, for work to be achieved, and to be achieved well together. This is our commitment. So with that, I'd like to hand over to John. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Faye, and it's a delight to be working with you again and on this webinar today. And I have great memories of being in New Zealand a couple of years ago, especially when we had 240 participants at our Auckland North Shore one-day workshop on severe trauma. So that was fantastic. So great to be here again with you. And so let's make a start then with looking at the content for the webinar. So I'll be looking at giving you some personal tips and techniques for dealing with trauma and stress, ideas for therapists, counselors, mental health, social care workers, also for working with people who are experiencing severe trauma or stress. And also I'll be flagging up our one-day workshop on the topic on the 16th of November. So do get to the GROW website and have a look at that. And I'll be highlighting the one-stop shop handbook, which I wrote a couple of years ago, What It Takes to Thrive, Techniques for Severe Trauma Recovery, and details of how to purchase that in either the paperback version or the ebook. And we'll have a brief Q&A session at the end. So, yes, this is the workshop, Solution-Focused Severe Trauma and Stress Recovery. We've had two so far, which have been really successfully delivered and well received. So do have a look at that. So just say a bit about my background. Well, I'm an adult survivor of severe and enduring childhood abuse and neglect myself. I've also had many adult trauma experiences, several which were near-death experiences, including drowning and being held up at knife point. So I've been there and experienced the territory. I worked in the UK National Health Service's mental health services for about 20 years. And in total, I've worked in mental health and psychological services for nearly 45 years. And within that time have worked with many people, or the whole range of issues, worries and concerns that people have concerning their mental health. Now in 1993, I was first introduced by Brief Therapy Practice in London to the solution-focused approach, and was delighted to have the privilege of being taught by Steve DeShazer, the co-founder of this approach. And I suppose in the last 25 years, I've had about 50 to 60 severe trauma recovery clients. And I can say that in the vast majority of cases, they've gone on to live full and productive lives. And I'll talk about that a bit later, because full and productive lives is what this is about, despite what has happened to people. So it's how we respond to the trauma and stress, which is important. Now, this slide talks about the 4 Fs, fight, flight, and freeze being the first 3. Now, certainly a lot of my clients, and I particularly, would go into flight or freeze mode when experiencing triggers to earlier traumatic experiences. And some people go into fight mode to try and deal with the overwhelming feelings they experience. But what the solution-focused approach to severe trauma recovery stresses is the need to face it foursquare head on. And that is really important in order to achieve survivorhood and recovery. So let's just run a couple of definitions by you. The definition of trauma: it's a programming which hinders your life. It hinders you too from thinking bravely of the future. It interprets you in a way less than what you are. But, and it's a big but, with appropriate help, it need not be a permanent state. And although you'll never forget what happened to you, the idea is, and the thrust of this approach to severe trauma recovery, is that you won't any longer be hindered by it. And definition of stress: the adverse reaction people have to excessive pressures or other types of demand placed upon them. And I heard a rather comical definition of extreme stress the other day. It's when you start to bite other people's fingernails. Okay. And the book's available, really. This is the one I've been talking to, What It Takes to Thrive, Techniques for Severe Trauma Recovery. And this is available from Grow at $59.80 for the paperback version and $28.75 for the ebook version. And you'll see, I've just put some little notes in the top. There are 6 sections in this book, and I'll talk about that shortly. But just to mention 2 other books I've written, there's a military version of this one, which is Beating Combat Stress, 101 Techniques for Recovery. And some of you may know people have been in the military. It's also helpful for other blue light services for their recovery too. It's a self-help book, and like What It Takes to Thrive, is a one-stop shop handbook for practitioners. And then Faye mentioned Preventing Suicide, the solution-focused approach, and the workshops we did. And that third one is the book that is a handbook for practitioners for that topic. Now, these are the 6 fields of concern to those who have experienced trauma: triggers, flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, then sleep disturbance. And sleep disturbance is often because the trauma hasn't been resolved. It's not been declared, hasn't been disclosed, hasn't been worked through. So sleep disturbance is the 4th field of concern. And then the lows that people get when they've been a victim of trauma. And you'll notice I'm avoiding the D word there. And then the 6th and final and most important section, thriving or living life to the full. And this training, both face-to-face training, the 2-day or 1-day workshops, and this webinar, emphasize how important it is to aim for living life to the full. Now, interesting, there are 3 reasons, or 3 main reasons, that practitioners avoid doing this sort of work, avoid working with people who've suffered unbelievable personal trauma, maybe where there are multiple deaths and carnage and injuries. Firstly, the practitioner fears they might say something that will make the client or the service user worse. So they don't say anything at all. They won't go there, won't discuss it. Second, the fear of vicarious traumatization. So you might say something that will shock me or frighten the wits out of me or give me nightmares, so don't tell me. And that is communicated non-verbally to clients, so they cooperate and they don't disclose what happened to them. And thirdly, the mistaken belief that there are thousands of specialists out there waiting for the phone to ring. Well, it ain't true. And those have been on the 1-day and 2-day workshops. You are the experts. You are the people who can deal with this. Now, water the flowers, not the weeds. So I put this little poster here. Now, it's very important to focus on what's working in the person's life. The weeds are the traumatic memory, the symptoms, thoughts, etc. But pre-session change, scaling progress, the preferred future, light bulb moments, these are what we concentrate on with the solution-focused approach. And it's very important, and I can speak passionately about this myself, to acknowledge and validate negative emotions. And the Reverend Dr. Selwyn Hughes, the theologian and Bible commentator, said, if you're not willing to acknowledge a negative emotion, you'll have to pay for it later with compound interest. Also, he said, when you bury negative emotions, you don't bury it dead, you bury it alive. And over the last 45 years, I have seen the dreadful consequences physically and mentally for people who do that. So this approach really encourages acknowledgement and validation of negative emotions. Now, 3 stages of recovery. Victim, survivor, we're very familiar with that. And it's helpful to help the client or service user acknowledge they were a victim, yet they have survived. And then this 3rd stage, thriving, living life to the full. And this is what we are about, really, helping people live fulfilling lives. And I have the absolute delight when I'm delivering face-to-face workshops, and I can usually tell who's going to come up to me in the break, and someone will tell me their story of the terrible things that happened to them. And yet now they've survived it and they are thriving. And I just love hearing those stories. Now, there's a little graphic about the victim's world. See, pretty limited, pretty miserable, downcast. Survivor's world, well, things, you know, starting to push out the boundaries a little. And then thrivers, sky's the limit, which is what we want. Now, what is this pain that people experience? Well, it's a combination of heartache when they think about the terrible things that they experienced or happened to them or they saw. And I hate this word psychache, but it's very accurate. That sort of angst in the brain, you know, oh, terrible thoughts. So combination of psychache and heartache is the pain that survivors want relieving of. And the solution-focused approach to severe trauma and stress recovery deals with that pain because it gets the client in the driving seat and in control of it rather than the other way around. And you can see quickly the link between wanting to be relieved of this pain if it goes on for years and they can't get rid of it, and suicide can seem the only way out. So there is a link I have discovered between unresolved trauma and suicide. So it's really important to help people get through this. Now let's look at some of the techniques. As I say in the book here, there are 5 techniques you can see for triggers there at the bottom. And one of these is that was then, this is now. And from my own trauma history, I have to use this technique probably about 4 times a week because of the many experiences I've had in the past and the many triggers that I'm confronted with. The thing is with triggers, you can never predict when they're going to happen. So you simply say to the person or teach the person to say, as soon as they have the thought or the smell or the taste that reminds them of the incident, just to say, that was then, this is now, as they look around in the present moment. So simple, yet so powerful and effective. And there's about half a page or so of that in the book. Second one is diaphragmatic breathing. And I'm going to stand up to give a demo for this. Most of us breathe incorrectly, and certainly those who've survived or experienced trauma breathe wrongly. Now watch here. Watch my abdomen here as I take in a breath. If I do it incorrectly, it's like this. I use the upper part of my chest to breathe it in. But breathing correctly, watch how my abdomen goes the other way. So we teach people correct breathing. In for the count of 7, out for the count of 11. Very easy to learn and apply. Good for gaining control over panic attacks. And I teach it in the sessions and give it as homework to practice. And it's also a good technique for helping get to sleep at night. So we'll cover also presuppositional language. And presuppositional language is a form of indirect communication. And it was Milton Erickson, the US psychiatrist, who introduced us to this. And it's a way of talking that presumes something without stating it directly. So they are implicit, unconscious suggestions. So the simple example of presuppositional language, someone comes to you with 2 problems, A and B, and you say, or you ask, which problem do you want to solve first, A or B? Which presupposes 3 things. Not maybe, solve, or perhaps not. It's which do you want to solve first? If you're interested more in the wonderful work of Milton Erickson, Ernst Rossi wrote a book of collected works of Milton Erickson and some of his amazing and quite amusing sometimes techniques that he developed. Now, intrusive thoughts. This is another problem for people. And with intrusive thoughts, it's really important to have a technique to deal with it as it occurs. And simple one is let it go, let it go, let it go. And again, you teach this into the session, and encourage the service user or person to use it, to try it out between now and when you next see them. And those of us who have ordinary stressful experiences in life where we're bothered by intrusive thoughts, whatever it is, we can use this technique for those too. And I use it on a regular basis, both for my intrusive thoughts of traumatic events and also for day-to-day things that might crop up. Now, I'm going to just adjust my notes here a little. And I want to go back actually to triggers, and just to show that with triggers, once the trigger is arrested in its tracks, then a flashback will not occur. However, we have techniques for dealing with flashbacks, which is fine, but to avoid that, if we encourage the client to use the trigger effectively, then that does not lead to a flashback, which is really important and empowering and equipping for the client or service user. Now, discharging negative feelings. I mentioned about Selwyn Hughes' discussion about how if we push things down, it doesn't help. And we can use something called the solution focused feelings tank. And this is as follows. And I devised this a few years ago. And so whatever the negative feeling is that the client or person has, it could be hopelessness, despair, grief, anger, whatever. And you find out where their current level is now, what their good enough level will be, and how they can run off some more of those negative feelings between now and when we see them next time. And all we're asking for is 1%. How can you run off just another 1% of your anger over the next week or two? And here's something interesting. What I have noticed over time with my many clients, and we're talking to colleagues who use this approach, and my own experience, is that you've got this simple graph here, mood up the vertical axis and time along the horizontal. When someone's in victim mode, they're just bumbling just above the bottom, really. Remember that graphic of the limited life. And then with survivor, they come up a bit, but have these ups and downs. And Yvonne Dolan, my mentor and friend in America, said, I realized there must be a third stage. And it's our duty to help clients achieve it. Once they achieve it, up they go. So their mood is up most of the time with little ups and downs, okay, but that is thriving. And all other thrivers I know are on that blue line on the graph. Now, interestingly, what you can do, you can use the simple solution focus technique of the 1 to 10 scale to scale victim, survivor, and thriver. So 1 stands for victim, roughly 5 is midway survivor, 10 is thriving 100%. So I ask someone as they're doing the work with me, on a scale of 1 to 10, with victim, survivor, and thriver, whereabouts are you today? And someone might say, well, I'm about 5.5, I think. How come you're at 5.5? Well, I've done this and I've done that and I've changed my thinking on such and such. My next question then is, what will you need to do to get to 6 between now and when we meet again, or over the next 2, 3, 4 weeks? So they're coming up with specific behaviors or changes in thinking that will achieve 6 out of 10 towards thriverhood. And I'm delighted to have an article published in the Journal of Solution Focused Practices in the next online issue, which has a questionnaire, 36-point questionnaire on thriverhood. So people can really understand where thriverhood is, or where they are on this scale. And that's accompanied by what thriving is about, what it is like, you know, what are we like as people when we are no longer victims or survivors, but are thriving. So, okay, I think we've probably got to a good point there where we could have a Q&A, Faye.
Yes,
and by the way, just
John.
before we do, just want to thank Faye terrifically for behind the scenes technical work. And you won't know this, but we had a little glitch to sort out about an hour ago, which we triumphed. You know, we found, using the solution focused approach, we built a solution, didn't we, Faye?
We did indeed. I tell you what, there was certainly some deep breathing going on then.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm really grateful to you, Faye, for all your help and for the webinar today.
Excellent, thank you, John. Great, well, I have had some great questions coming in. So, but first of all, I have had a couple of people say that because you were on screen share, they actually missed seeing the demo of your breathing. So I wondered if you could quickly just stop the screen share, if that's possible, and show us that demo again.
Yes, certainly, I will.
Cool.
Right, okay. So I'm standing up side on. Can you all thumbs up for you, those who can see? Good, okay. So incorrect breathing is where I'm taking a breath in, and you'll notice how my hand goes in towards my spine. So I breathe with my upper chest, which is wrong breathing. So correct breathing is where we breathe, when we take a breath in, my hand will go away and to the front. So I'm breathing in now. Out. In. So I'm using my diaphragm, which is correct breathing. Hope you all managed to see that.
Good stuff. Yep, thank you. Nice and clear. Cool. I've had a couple of questions about, there was one, the weeds and the flowers slide. Can you just go over that a little bit more?
Yes, I can, certainly. Let's go up to, let's find that slide then. Here we are. Share, and I'll go back. Yeah, what happens is, with this work, people come to us with armfuls of weeds, which is their trauma experience, their terrible memories, their mental disturbance, and their physical, perhaps, or somatogenic effects of it. These are the weeds, those tall grey things there. But what we do as workers, we encourage the client to talk about their weeds. And by encouraging them to talk about their flowers, important difference. And by talking about their flowers, what we're doing is with a fine spouted watering can, we are watering the root systems of those flowers so they grow large and shut out the weeds, which die of their own accord. So the solution-focused approach is talking about the flowers in people's lives, their best hopes for what their life will be in the future, and what skills, strengths, and resources they will bring into practice to achieve that. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, that's great. That's good. And we have also had, excuse me, the solution-focused scale. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and also each of the phases as a cycle, please?
Yes. So looking at the board here, when someone's in victim mode, that they're still very much traumatized, their life is very small, they're not functioning. We all know people who like that. We've met people like that who are like in a shell almost. Their life is so small. At the very worst, they're at one, a victimhood. And gradually they get to acknowledge and appreciate they were a victim. And they realize then about here, they were a survivor. They had survived it. They are not dead. They have survived. And how did they do it? And we can ask questions like, what particular survivor techniques did you use to get to that position where you can say, I survived it, I got through it. And once they appreciate that they've reached that stage and they're no longer a victim, then they can start on this journey towards, what are my best hopes for the future? What do I want my life to be like? If I was to write a letter from 5, 10, 15 years time back to a friend or relative now, how would I describe this life? And that is 10. But most people are content with 8 or 9. That's good enough. They're thriving at 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And on the one-day workshops, I give a handout with in 3 sections which detail what victimhood, survivorhood, and thriverhood entails.
Right. Great. Cool. Thank you. Super. And we have had some more questions come in, but I'm aware of the time. So would you like to carry on and we can catch up?
Yeah, I'm happy for you, Faye, to say that's the last question, because we've got to finish at it's a 40-minute webinar, isn't it, in total?
It is, yeah. Zoom won't cut us off though, so no panic.
No, okay, right. So happy to deal with the next question that's coming in.
Cool. Okay. So, wondering how the solution-focused approach works with MBSR, where difficult emotions are welcomed and released. Is this the same idea of let it go?
Help me out here. NBSR?
Perhaps St. Peter can assist us here. St. Peter was the asker of the questions. You're welcome to unmute yourself, Peter. And yes, I'm not familiar with MBSR either. So let me scroll down. Mindfulness. It's all about mindfulness.
Oh, mindfulness, yeah.
Based on source reduction.
A lot of my yeah, good. Okay, a lot of my colleagues use mindfulness as an extra layer of really getting an appreciation of being in the here and now and just letting things just wash past you. And it was the question about letting go in relation to that. Yes, similar effect is achieved. I mean, I particularly like the command to yourself because it you can say it with great authority, and it stresses this business of control against lack of control. And a lot of people who have survived trauma of all sorts of severity, and incidentally, I'll just an aside here, all these tools and techniques are transferable across the whole trauma range. Doesn't matter if it's rape, sudden death, near-death experiences, road traffic crashes with multiple deaths. These techniques are applicable across the range. And a lot of people feel out of control by all these thoughts and feelings and sensations. So they're very much in victimhood still. But let it go, let it go, let it go really emphasizes this idea that you are in control of this. Yeah. So instead of lack of control, you have the control. So that's why I like it a lot. Hope that answers the question.
Cool. All good. All good. Right. So back to the slides.
Okay. Yes. Well, that's that was my penultimate slide, actually, Faye.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yep.
So, no, that's all right.
We've certainly got some more questions there. So
yeah. Okay.
Let's carry on with that.
My last slide was going to be workshop ends, but we're not there yet. Or webinar ends.
All good. How do you avoid being an enabler? In that you regularly meet up with a client, and they're releasing, they're sharing their story, and you as the therapist or support person, how do you look after yourself and not become that enabler or that you know what I'm trying to say here?
Yes,
you take
I think
on the burden as well yourself, and
yeah, I mean, some people want to tell their story. It's important at the very basic level for people to name what happened to them. So some people who've survived trauma can be very mealy-mouthed of what happened to them. And they say, well, one client once said, well, I didn't have a particularly happy childhood. But eventually they were able to name it as severe and enduring physical abuse from their father. And so naming it is really important. But some clients don't want to go into detail. One client I had who was severely sexually abused over many years said, all I want you to know is I was sexually abused over a 13-year period. That's fine. That's all I need to know. I'm not going to ask if that's not, they don't want to tell me. Yet others will go into great detail and say about the horrors of what happened, who died and when, how they bled out and how long it took, etc. And I have to tell myself, as I'm listening to this and I'm acknowledging and I'm validating and I'm complimenting them on what they're saying, and I'm having a deep empathy with them as they're relating, at the back of my mind, I'm saying, this is a case for supervision within the next 12 hours. I don't want to give any messages that I'm distressed by what they're telling me, because it will shut them up potentially. If they need to talk, they need to talk. And clients are on a whole continuum. Some just don't want to tell you anything at all apart from what happened, and then others who want to tell every detail. So yeah, that's how I protect myself. And of course, you know, as all of us who are in this field, achieve or try and achieve healthy work-life balance. So out with friends, folk clubs, gardening, walking, cycling, you get the balance. Hope that answers that one.
Good stuff. Good stuff. There is also, sorry, I've got quite a long list, which is great. The slides. Oh, someone's asked if we've got your slides, John, to share afterwards.
Happy to, yeah. Have you got them, Faye, or shall I ping them across to you?
Perhaps if you ping them across to me afterwards. Actually, I think you did prior, so yes, we will be sharing them with everyone.
Okay.
So,
in fact, I think I did a small amendment on one of them, so I'll ping you the latest version.
Good stuff. Cool.
Okay.
Cool. Now, so let it go, let it go, let it go. Do we literally tell a client to let go? Just wondering if that could be seen as insensitive or disregarding of how they're feeling. Is it more about timing, though, through the discussion of the technique?
Yeah, the latter is about timing, because before that, there would have been acknowledgement and validation of feelings, so that the client really feels heard about the negative feelings around that incident that they're recalling. So give you a sort of small example in my own personal life. I sent someone an email, a friend an email, and just before they're about to go on 2 weeks holiday, when they're going to have no access to emails, and they misinterpreted what I'd said, took it the wrong way. And so I had to do this for myself. I thought, oh, nothing I can do, you know, except wait a day or so, then compile the email to apologize and for the miscommunication, or for my lack of clarity, and then wait until they're back from holiday. So I had to tell, every time I thought of it, oh, I upset them, is just say, okay, let it go, let it go, let it go. And then I'm able to carry on with everyday life without being constantly pestered by it. So I hope that example illustrates how that works.
Good stuff. Yeah, that's all good. Another example of that, I guess, is saying it is what it is, which takes the stress out of the situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Yep.
Yeah, which just de-stresses.
And the wonderful thing about these techniques, they are so simple, and yet they are so effective. And why, I mean, I've been teaching this now for 20 years or so, and what I found, I train more voluntary and non-statutory agencies and their workers and helpline workers than I do professionals now. And because it's non-jargon and no psychobabble, people can understand this, and they can see it apply in their own lives so simply and yet so effectively, which helps them go along this continuum. You know, there's no, it doesn't have to be complicated. You know, and I could say more about complicated approaches, but I won't. But this is simple and straightforward.
Great stuff. Good. A question's come in about how much of someone's past abuse and trauma, someone that you're supporting, can trigger yours, and what are the techniques around keeping yourself safe as a support person?
Yeah, that can happen. It can happen, and has happened. I remember one case 20 years ago. Someone came into my counselling room who looked just like someone who had disappeared out of my life, who I was very fond of, something like 15 years previously. And I was totally re-traumatized by this, and needed to go to supervision. I took it to supervision, obviously, and then I had to have 2 or 3 sessions with a therapist I'd used before. And that is very helpful, not only for me, but enabled me to continue to be effective, congruent, and powerful with people I'm working with. Powerful is the wrong word, but as effective as possible with people I'm working with.
I suppose the very first step in that is acknowledging how you feel as a support person, or that it's okay for you to feel like, hey, this is bringing up my own stuff, and I need to deal with this separately from supporting this person in this way.
Yes, although I wouldn't share that with the client in the session, because I don't want to burden them with anything I may have going on. So I'm just logging that for dealing with later.
Right, yeah, good as gold. Another one was talking about
presuppositional language.
Thank you.
The longest word in the solution focus lexicon.
The open questions. Can you give us some more examples, please?
Yes. Someone's got a problem that's causing a difficulty. You can, and it's on their mind a lot. You can say, tell me about a time in the last week or two when it's been less of a problem for you. So that presupposes there was a time when it was less of a problem. And you can ask questions like, and as you make improvements forward, who will be the first to notice that things are better? Which presupposes several things. 1, that you're going to make improvements. 2, that someone will be first to notice the improvement in you. And if someone's first to notice, someone's going to be second. Who will be second to notice? So there's 3 presuppositions in that very short sentence. So I hope that's another illustration.
Excellent. Oh, that's good. Cool. And I think that pretty much brings us up to date. Does anybody else have any additional questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself or write in the chat. No, I think it's all good, John. It's now 7:44, so we've done very well on time.
We have, haven't we? I think I've amazed myself, because normally I get carried away with things, when they get more and more interesting.
Nope, that's great. Cool. Well, again, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Heartfelt thanks. Ngā mihi nui. And we will be back in touch tomorrow. John, do you have that final slide just to share about the details of the workshop and the book? Did you have that one there? Did I send that to you?
Let's have a look. I've got the, yes, let's have a look. Share screen. Share that one up. Yes, that's the book there, What It Takes to Thrive. Yep. Techniques for Severe Trauma Recovery. And if you get in touch with Faye for copies of that ebook or paperback, we've got plenty of copies in. And the workshop, I've not got that
slide. No problem at all. I'll send the information to everybody. And again, thank you all so much for joining us.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, and great to see you. And thank you for attending this evening.
Lovely. Thanks, everyone.